The 2025 Atlantic hurricane season has officially begun. Today in Weather Legends, we'll talk all about it and discuss the outlooks for this season. Before we begin, I'd like to congratulate Morgan Levin, a Clark High School senior from Westbury, Long Island, and Mr. Hanley's business education class. We had a contest for many to come up with the Weather Legends logo. So many wonderful entries, by the way. We thank all the participants, but this is the one we chose, and we congratulate Morgan on a great effort and a wonderful logo. All right, congratulations, Morgan. Thank you so much for your contribution to the Weather Legends project here, which hopefully all you are enjoying and watching. And well, it's been really a blast talking about a lot of things in the past and a lot of historical weather. And today we're going to focus on the tropics because lo and behold, it's that time of year. We're getting there again. All the projections coming out, and we've had a long history of tracking and monitoring tropical storms, hurricanes, and everything throughout the years, especially right here in the Metro New York City area. Bill Corbell, I want to start with you because, for so many years, I mean, how many years now you think? You're talking maybe a century or so of monitoring hurricanes and tropical systems. Or, I mean, what have we seen over the years that's fascinating?
Yeah, it's about that. Of course, they go back before that. We've had, these storms back in Revolutionary days, and obviously they were here before we settled on this continent. But records really go back in a decent way for a little over 100 years, back to about 1850. And we do have a chart that shows the storms from 1850 on, thanks to National Hurricane Center. And what's interesting, I think, is this. One, the red bars you see, those are hurricanes. And they really have not increased that much. As I look back, even back into the late 1800s, we were seeing maybe 10, 12 hurricanes a year. The yellow are tropical storms, and notice there are a lot more of those. So here's the question. Are we just spotting a lot more of these storms now than we did back in, say, 1885, when there was something like 19 storms, and there were no satellites, no radar, no airplanes flying around. Only way you knew there was a storm out in the middle of the Atlantic was if a ship blundered into it and was able to escape it. So, there are variations in amounts. And of course, lately we've seen maybe an increase, and that could be part of global warming too. I mean, you go back to 2020, we had 30 total storms and 14 hurricanes. I made a list because I can't remember them all, and 7 major hurricanes. And then we dropped down a little bit, 21 and 2021, 22, we had 14 storms, and a little bit above what had been the long-term average, which I think, guys, remind me, it isn't around 14 or 15 named storms and 5 to 7 hurricanes or something on average, but we've obviously been well above that the last several years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, the, hurricane experts, so to say, have already put out the start of the initial forecast like they do every season. This is the Colorado State University. I think Dr. William Gray used to be the one who did most of these forecasts back in the past. And, again, they tend to go above normal every year. There's your average, Bill. 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. So that's where we stand right now. And there'll be multiple sources that'll come out with more forecasts as the season starts to kick off here. But we talk about, Bill, like you said in the chart here, the frequency, the number of storms going way back, I mean, to the 1800s, 1900s. And maybe go to Joe Chaffee here. We've seen so many storms that have tracked in, it seems to be a similar direction, Joe. So, I mean, does this ever suggest that, it's always going to be the same? Are there going to be variations and things that maybe we haven't seen before? Or is this just kind of a general guide?
Well, it's you look at that map and you would just obviously see it's like somebody just took red and just splattered it all over the place. I guess the only thing is you see even a few streaks where they go into Portugal, and we've seen that. Also, ones that go up into the UK. We've seen that. I don't know. When I look at something along the lines of the fact that this is how it's happened before, and it's likely to happen almost the same way again. I mean, there'll be variations of all of that, but how much can we glean? The problem with climatology is that past performance is not an indicator of future outcomes necessarily. I mean, you look at Climo and you say, okay, well, Climo says this is what's supposed to happen, but inevitably, every once in a while, you'll get something that goes out of the ordinary. And just by the way, I wanted to just go back to just what you were talking about, the charts and the frequencies, and Bill, you pointed out, the number of hurricanes has not changed very much. The number of tropical storms have increased. And I mean, I can remember, at least when I, first got started, late 70s, early 80s, the normals that were being carried at the time were 10 named storms and 6 hurricanes. So the hurricanes only gone up by 1. The tropical storm totals have gone up by 4. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact, well, a couple of things. You have, obviously, the satellites that we have today are far more sophisticated than the satellite stuff that we had in the late 70s, early 80s. So they're finding storm. They're able to figure out now something is a tropical storm, even if they don't send a plane in there to confirm, especially the ones that are out in the open waters. So I think the technology has allowed us to, pick up on storms that probably, if you go back pre the satellite era, there were tropical systems that may have slipped under.
Sure.
To use the phrase, under the radar when radar didn't really exist. So I mean, there are probably a lot of ocean storms that were out there, and I want to point to two things that the 2 storms in the last 5 or 6 years. And they both were early season storms, and one was last year was Beryl, and I think a few years before that, 5 years or so before that, was another Beryl, and they were both in June. And we're talking about storms where the hurricane force winds extended out like 5 miles from the center. Okay, I mean, these were glorified severe thunderstorms. I mean, really, that's what they were, and. These types of systems are probably the types of systems that always happen from time to time, going back, and just never got picked up at all. So it's hard, it's hard to argue. It's hard for me to argue the point that the number of storms have been increasing. I just don't know that that's the case. And the other thing that's very interesting is, and I've heard this brought up a few times by folks at the Hurricane Center, the number of Category 3 or higher storms has not really changed very much in the last 30 or 40 years. So, does that go? Does that counter the global the warming argument? Or is it as a result of warming that perhaps the number of perversely that may be the reason why there were fewer severe storms?
I think that chart proves your point, because if you look back in the left-hand side of it, the pre-satellite area, you saw fewer tropical storms relative to hurricanes. Look at the right side. The preponderance of years has more tropical storms than hurricanes. Why? Because now, like you said, we can spot them. We also spot something that's a tropical storm for a day, and that goes in.
Right, or even just for hours.
Yeah.
And also, I think, every year the Hurricane Center goes back and they do this they review the storms, and every once in a while they'll do like a long term, they'll go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years and go back and review, adding some systems that they thought were tropical storms and may have well been hurricanes, but there have been a number that they thought were hurricanes, and there have been a couple of them where they thought were hurricanes, and it turns out that they weren't, and they made them back into tropical storms. So there's this, you got old technology and new technology just kind of working together, or you make it all mesh, and it doesn't necessarily work.
We did not have the technology that we have today. And Satellite pictures were I used to get my satellite pictures through Associated Press at that time, and they would come out maybe once every 6 hours. So you really couldn't rely on that. You had to rely on, as Bill said, ship reports. And that was basically about it. And the National Hurricane Center, who provided most of the data, and they didn't have as much as they have today either. So it was really, really rough. And if a hurricane watch went out, and we're talking back in the 60s, it was widespread panic. People really, really panicked. Not like today. I think people are a little bit more accustomed to hearing things like a hurricane watch or a tropical storm watch. Not that they really know the difference.
Well,
yeah, you know what I mean? I don't know if people really know the difference between a tropical storm watch and a hurricane watch.
Well, they still run out and empty every home.
Oh yeah, right.
Of every piece of plywood that there is.
Yeah, and the media is part of that, obviously. But we as meteorologists, we had to bring the facts as best as possible. I thought it was pretty challenging back then. I mean, I'm going back to Bill may remember Agnes.
Mm-hmm.
You remember?
I remember Agnes too.
I don't remember specifics. I remember the name.
Yeah, that came up. Did a loop
72
New York City, went into the Poconos, destroyed the Poconos.
Some of the Pennsylvania all-time record rainfalls have stood.
Right.
Not all of them now, because in the recent years they've had a couple of them taken down. But there's a lot of places where the record rainfalls all date back to Agnes, and that was a June system.
Yeah.
It also, as I recall, had there was a big upper low that cut off and got involved in all of it, which made it do the weird things it did.
Exactly. And by the way, this is the first May that no tropical named storms have been formed.
How about that?
Normally we have 3. And I mean, it's 2/3 over. But this is the first time the Hurricane Center said there's been a lack of tropical activity in the month of May.
Well,
I
think it's something like, I think the stat is something like maybe 8 out of the last 10 Mays have had a named tropical system in the month of May. And then you have to go back like 40 years to find a May storm. So yeah, maybe the last 10 years have been more of an anomaly than anything else.
I remember very distinctly in 1992, there were a lot of forecasters who were saying, well, maybe this is going to be a lower than normal hurricane year, because we had gotten all the way to literally the end of August, and there had not been a single named tropical cyclone. Very, very unusual. I mean, July usually is a slack month, but in August, we usually get at least 1 or 2 storms. And here we are coming up in the end of August, and then look what happened. The first tropical system of the season, the A storm, was a storm by the name of Andrew, which literally sliced through Florida and eventually made landfall in the Gulf. One of the most devastating storms to that point in time. Yeah, up until then, it was a lower than normal hurricane season, but look what happened with the very first one. So, all you need is just one, and that was the one that year in 1992.
When these projections come out, Bill, a lot of people automatically knee-jerk and panic. And it seems like it's always this is going to be the worst year ever. But, Bill, do we really know exactly how every storm is going to behave, where they're going to track this far ahead of time? It's impossible, right?
No, of course not. You may know the areas in which they are more likely to form, such as, the Gulf has been very warm the last few years, and more likely than not, there'll be activity there. But where the storms go depend upon so many factors. In the southern area, it's got the trade winds that move it to the west. Does it encounter wind shear, anything like that to destroy it? As it moves farther north, it gets involved with our northern westerly latitude winds, and what will they do it? So no, you can't tell where a particular storm is going when it first starts. It's when it starts to gain some momentum and gets involved in weather systems that we can really foresee, that you know where it's going roughly. And the increase in forecast accuracy has been amazing. I think now our 120-hour forecast, that's the blue graph you see, is very close to what it was for 24 hours back in 1990. And that is just phenomenal.